Hi, my name is Tom Bradford. I'm a barrister and partner at the law firm Freeths. This video is on how to naturalise as a British citizen if you're an EU citizen in the UK ahead of Brexit. I have a separate video dealing with your options, including how to apply for settled status. This is part of a series on settled status for EU nationals, so do subscribe and click the notification bell for updates as I release them. Let's start with the chronology. So you can see here Brexit is on the 29th of March 2019, that's exit day. Then there's a transition period to the 31st of December 2020, and then a deadline for applications for settled status on the 30th of June 2021. Some, having seen my other video on settled status, may not wish to apply for settled status or pre-settled status and may wish to naturalise as a British citizen. Clearly that's an alternative route. If you do that, then as a British citizen you will not need to apply for settled status or pre-settled status. Let's just have a look at the chronology in this context. So I've got an example here about qualifying to naturalise as a British citizen after 5 years. It does depend on first applying for permanent residence. So here, if you have spent 5 years in the UK and can show that, for example, you were working or doing one of the other qualifying activities for 5 years, and you can evidence that through, for example, producing P60s from your employer, then you will have accrued the right to permanent residence, and you'll be able to prove it through making an application to certify that right. So the document in question is this. It's a document certifying permanent residence. This is simply confirmation of a pre-existing right. It's not a permission-based document like a visa. It's confirming a right that you already have acquired under the EU treaty. Now this, as I say, is a prerequisite to then applying to naturalise as a British citizen. And the key obstacle that people encounter is that they require 1 year free before applying to naturalise as a British citizen. So you've got to have 1 year where you're not subject to immigration control or any restriction after the 5 years has been accrued. You need that 1 year, and I've just illustrated that here in this diagram. You can see that this person accrued the right of permanent residence at 2018, and assuming that the associated document was secured straight away, then they're entitled to naturalise as a British citizen 1 year later. There's an important point to make here, which is that, as I say, because it's a right that accrues independently of any document that you receive, you don't, for example, receive any letter from the Home Office or anyone else when you accrue that right to permanent residence, notwithstanding its significance. You need that 1 year free before applying. This is really important because for those who now want to apply to naturalise as a British citizen and secure their British passport before Brexit, and I'll talk about who may want to do that, they will want to argue that they accrued the right of permanent residence more than 1 year ago. That way they'll be able to show that they have 1 year free before they then apply to naturalise as a British citizen. There are various exceptions, but I'm dealing here with the most common route. Now you can see here that this person accrues the right towards the end of 2018, but is then able to naturalise as a British citizen at some point in 2019, so late 2019. Now that will be after Brexit. The people who may not want to leave it that long are, for example, German nationals, where there's some doubt over whether Germany will recognise dual citizenship post-Brexit, and that's because the general position is that dual citizenship is recognised and permissible. In other words, you don't have to relinquish your German passport in respect of other EU member states. So the current position is that you can hold a British passport and a German passport because the UK is in the EU. But post-Brexit, the UK will not be a member state of the European Union. and therefore that recognition will not be in place. So many Germans, for example, have been applying to secure their British passport pre-Brexit, so that the current recognition by Germany will follow through. And that's thought to be the case, that if Germany recognises it now, then that will carry through, whereas the general policy position will stay post-Brexit, so that you will not necessarily be able to do that as a German citizen after Brexit. So if you're in that position, then unless, and this is the exception which I'll deal with in a separate video, unless you're married to a British citizen, you'll need to show that you've been in the UK for 5 years, that you've been doing a qualifying activity for those 5 years, or different qualifying activities like working or studying with comprehensive sickness insurance, and that you accrued that right more than 1 year ago. If you do that, then as soon as your application for permanent residence is granted, you will be able to apply immediately to naturalise as a British citizen. And I've shown that in this diagram. So in this case, this person is able to apply now to show that at the end of 2017, they accrued the right to permanent residence. And then as soon as that application is granted, they're able to apply immediately to naturalise as a British citizen. So this person's residence was from 2013 to 2017. I'll just zoom in on that. So you can see here, 2013 to 2017. They acquired the right to permanent residence in 2017, and they're applying now to confirm that that is the case, to secure this card, the document certifying permanent residence. This will be accompanied by a letter and will state the date on which permanent residence accrued. What I do for my clients is make representations in the cover letter to the application and invite the Home Office to confirm the date on which permanent residence was accrued, because it's so important, especially ahead of Brexit, for all the reasons I've described. So if you do that, then the Home Office, it compels the Home Office to state the date, rather than just the date on which the application was determined. The Home Office will confirm the date on which permanent residence was accrued in the past, rather than just, as I say, assuming that it's the date on which you applied, or indeed the date on which the application is determined. And if that's done, then 1 year, what you can do is, as soon as that application is determined, then apply in 2019, which will be the 1 year later, to naturalise as a British citizen. Let me just zoom out and you can see that properly. So here they'll be applying in January 2019 to naturalise as a British citizen. So this is the position, as I say, of many EU nationals that not necessarily because of the EU settlement scheme, but because of their position in their home countries on recognition of dual citizenship, that they need to apply to naturalise as a British citizen before Brexit. And for that reason, because Brexit is less than a year away now, they have to prove that permanent residence was accrued more than 1 year ago, so they can apply now. Once the application is determined, they can apply now to naturalise as British citizens. Now, one of the other points I want to deal with in this video is the residence requirements to naturalise as a British citizen, as opposed to the residence requirements for permanent residence. This is really important because some people approach this just on the basis that the relevant residence requirements are those applying to permanent residence, not realising that they're in fact much more restrictive in respect of naturalising as a British citizen. So the residence requirements for permanent residents for those 5 years are highlighted. That you've got to be in the UK for at least half of the year, so for 180 days, and then you can have 1 year of the 5 outside of the UK completely for an important reason such as work or study. That very broadly is the position. Obviously, this is a matter on which, as for all of these matters, you need to take legal advice. If you want me to have a look at the circumstances of your case, please don't hesitate to give me a call. There are my details. If you drop me an email, then happy to have a discussion. So that's the general position in relation to permanent residence. But in relation to naturalising, you'll see here in green below that there's 450-day total absence requirements with not more than 90 days in the last year. So it's the equivalent, though, the 450 days breaks down into the equivalent of 90 days a year, although that's not necessarily the way that it's calculated. That's half of the permissible absence for permanent residence. So you can see here, if your objective is permanent residence, that's one thing. But if your ultimate objective is to naturalise, then you need to have adequate residence planning to make sure that no citizenship opportunity is missed here, or that you don't have to wait a longer period of time before being able to apply to naturalise as a British citizen, if that's your objective. So this is the document certifying permanent residence. Just to return to the chronology, those are the key points that I wanted to make about applying to naturalise as a British citizen ahead of Brexit. If that's something that you want to do, or indeed if you want to naturalise as a British citizen after Brexit, then don't hesitate to get in touch with me if you want assistance with the application or advice. I'm going to be producing some more videos on this subject, including on the deadline for applying for settled status and on the application form. So do subscribe if you want to receive those updates, and click the notification bell if you want to get them as soon as they're released. Thanks very much for listening.